Hello and welcome into another episode of Lockdown Wolves. It's the post-game podcast from the Timberwolves Game 1 Western Conference Finals loss to the Thunder. We'll talk about what happened. A lot about this game was completely predictable. What are some of the easy, just surface-level adjustments the Timberwolves can make for Game 2 and be in a much better spot? Talk about how SGA exploded and the Wolves failed to score, scoring just 88 points for their second straight Game 1 in the playoffs. We'll break it all down next.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Happy hump day. And it's the post-game pod for the Timberwolves' disappointing Game 1 loss to the Thunder. Yes, the final score was, They only scored 88 points. They got blown out by, 26, if my math is correct? Yeah, 26. It was obviously a lot closer than that, but we'll talk about how the game got away from the Wolves in the third quarter of this game. A lot that happened was predictable. We talked about it on Monday's show, on Tuesday's show. It just was a little bit more extreme. When the wheels came off, they really came off, and it maybe the way it unfolded shouldn't have been a complete surprise, partly because of that. Or in part because of that, there is some obvious adjustments and some obvious things that really probably will go differently for the rest of this series. Some parallels to Game 1 against Golden State. We'll talk about all that on the show today. First, a big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. You can also watch on YouTube, and you can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. All right. So the way this game unfolded, what I want to do is I'll talk about how this played out, because I thought there were a couple of key moments in this game where the wheels really did come off. And that is what led to this snowball effect. And the final score is super ugly, but the concern is the 88 points that Minnesota scored. And those moments in which the wheels did come off, why did that happen? So I want to start there in context of the overall chronology of the game. And then I want to get into a couple of other takeaways, and we'll close with individual studs and duds as we usually do on the post-game pod. So first and foremost, the first quarter was kind of exactly what I think we all expected it to be. Minnesota turned it over, I think, 6 times in the first quarter, which is far too many. Obviously, they finished this game overall with, 19 turnovers as a team. Too many, but only 4 more than OKC. The problem is OKC is much better at running after turnovers than Minnesota is. That was the case in the regular season and the case in this game too. We'll dig more into that here in a little bit. That was an issue in the first quarter. Minnesota's still up by 3, but it easily could have been 5, 7, 8 points, except for some of those turnover issues and some missed open threes. That became even more obvious in the second quarter when Minnesota missed a ton of open threes. And yet, with 1 minute left in the second quarter, 1 minute left in the first half, Minnesota was up by 9 points. And it's easy to point to the wheels coming off in the third quarter, but where things started to go wrong was with that 1 minute left in the second quarter. You'll remember, Anthony Edwards actually finally got to the free throw line and made both free throws. Wolves are up 9. Coming down on the other end with 1 minute to play, Jaden McDaniels gets an outstanding block on SGA. Just an outstanding block. And then what happens? In semi-transition, Mike Conley takes up a little bit of a tough shot. It was basically like a 1-on-3 or a 2-on-4 or something weird where they didn't really have numbers. And Conley pump fakes a 3 from the corner, takes a dribble, kind of sidestep to the wing just above the break, and misses a step-back 3 with them up 9. On the other end, the Timberwolves get called for a foul, a silly foul on Ant. SGA makes a couple of free throws. Ant splits a pair of free throws. Jalen Williams, J-Dub, hits a shot on the other end. It's a 6-point game. Then Randall loses the ball, and the Thunder score on an offensive rebound with just a second to play. It becomes a 4-point halftime lead. It should have been a 9+ point halftime lead, but instead, in the final 1 minute, OKC goes on a 6-1 run over the final minute of the second quarter, the first half. That is where this was lost. It was just a silly. If Conley hits that 3, they're up 12. If Conley doesn't take that 3, they're, obviously then the Thunder aren't running out the other way on this transition opportunity. That's where things started to come apart for Minnesota. And obviously the third quarter is where things really came apart. to me, one of the key moments was when OKC went small. Is mostly out of necessity. Isaiah Hartenstein and Chet Holmgren each ended up with, I think they both had 4 fouls in the third quarter, and OKC went small, and Minnesota continued to brick threes. They continued to pretty much exclusively shoot threes and miss threes at an alarming rate, which we'll talk about. Alarming and almost surely unrepeatable rate, by the way. And then OKC got rolling, and that's what OKC does. They took the lead, I think, for good with about 5.5 minutes left in the third quarter, and it was just kind of an onslaught at that point. I know by the end of the quarter, Minnesota was a 10-point game, but it was kind of that, like, and Ant picks up his 4th foul there with like a minute to play in the third quarter in a 10-point game. So that's when things really started to go sour, and it was close until the final 3 minutes. Garbage time went all OKC's way. So ignore the fact that the final was 26 points. It really was like a 12, 14, 16-point loss. Fine. Like, we can call it that. But in terms of how the game played out, the high turnovers for Minnesota, the points off of turnovers in transition, fast break scoring for OKC, those are both fully expected. The amount of 3-point attempts that the Wolves got, and by the way, not just 3-point attempts, but open catch and shoot 3-point opportunities, especially from the corners, that was completely expected. And to me, and also the grifting by SGA, which we'll talk a little bit about, but SGA getting to line, 14 times, I believe, in this game. 14 times. That was expected. And then I guess the thing that I wasn't expecting was OKC to dominate points in the paint as thoroughly as they did. The Thunder had 54 points in the paint in this game. Minnesota had 20 points in the paint, which is shocking. And there's a couple of things we can blame for that. I actually think the first issue, and Minnesota's half-court defense was pretty good for the most part for the first 2.5 quarters. I mean, they only gave up 44 points in the first half. And OKC was only scoring in transition. But all of a sudden in the second half, the point of attack defense for the Wolves was miserable. Like, blow-bys left and right. It wasn't just SGA. Obviously, he was the biggest one. But really anybody, the Wolves were sloppy in attacking closeouts. They were taking bad angles on the perimeter, and OKC was waltzing into the paint. Rudy Gobert, I didn't think played very well in this game. He ended up only playing 21 minutes. When he was off the floor, the Thunder took advantage. When he was on the floor, it mattered a lot in the first half. There were a lot of neverminds in the first half. He was credited with 1 block. It felt like he had 2 or 3. The first half was pretty good defensively for Rudy, but the second half was not. And then when he was off the floor, it was a layup line. It really was. If you look at the paint on off the court, I'm pretty confident OKC was much better, not surprisingly, in the paint when Gobert was off the floor. He only played 21 minutes of this game, and he was in early foul trouble. He picked up 2 fouls in the first minute and a half, so that's part of the reason. But defensively, yeah, I mean, like, point of attack was poor for Minnesota in the second half. And we can complain about the Shai Gilgeous-Alexander free throw merchant stuff, the grifting. It's a real thing, and it's horrendous to watch. And I bet a Thunder fan, if they were being honest, would tell you that they also think it's miserable to watch. They may not admit it, but trust me, it's a lot more fun to watch Anthony Edwards than it is to watch Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I didn't say it was better than SGA, but it's a lot more fun to watch Anthony Edwards. And I, an honest Thunder fan would tell you that. That's a real thing. And I digress, but I didn't want to get on that soapbox this early in the show, because it's not why the Wolves lost. Again, hear me when I say that. It's not why the Wolves lost. It's gross, but it's not why the Wolves lost. That was a real thing in this game, but Minnesota stopped playing with physicality in the second half. And I think it was in part due to, being petrified they were going to get called for fouls, whereas Alex Caruso and, other Casey Wallace and others on OKC were not getting called for fouls on the perimeter with frequency for doing kind of the same thing. But Minnesota didn't move their feet anyway, so it didn't really matter in the second half. They weren't moving their feet and staying in front of guys. Like, they weren't being as active, as engaged, as physical on the perimeter, and that's what led to this layup line and all the points of the paint. And really kind of fueled OKC. Ended up, scoring 70 points in the second half, outscoring Minnesota 70-40 in the second half of this game, and scoring 114 points. But Minnesota was actually really good defensively early. I want to talk about Minnesota on offense as well. They scored just 88 points themselves. The shooting percentage was horrendous. And also some like reason for positivity, for optimism heading into game 2, which is certainly something we'll cover on Thursday's show. But there are a lot of those reasons for positivity and optimism. Even just looking, like, if you didn't even watch the game, you look at the box score, you'd be like, wait a minute, this shouldn't have played out this way. Like this is law of averages, right? This is going to turn around. Yeah, I think there's a lot of that here because Minnesota got a lot of shots that they wanted in this game. They just didn't make them. So we'll break that down a bit further. We'll close the show today with individual studs and duds. It's all coming next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at SKIMS. When I found out SKIMS was making underwear for men, I was intrigued. I've heard so much about their quality from friends and family that I had to give it a try. And let me tell you, SKIMS lives up to the hype. I've always had issues with underwear. I mean, I'm sure I'm not alone with that. Fit, comfort, maybe it's just finding the right style. But SKIMS changed all of that. Their men's line offers something for everyone, from boxer briefs to classic briefs, all designed with the perfect balance of comfort and style. I tried the SKIMS Stretch 5-inch boxer brief. I walk around a lot for my day job, and, like, you need something that's comfortable. I don't necessarily work out all the time, but I tried wearing like workout underwear type stuff, boxer briefs. That didn't really, like, it didn't feel right for me. But SKIMS Stretch boxer briefs, the 5-inch inseam, finally felt like that I had found the missing link. It gives you all the movement you need for anything you do throughout an active day. And you don't feel like you're walking around in gym clothes for the entire day. And most importantly, they don't lose shape and they don't ride up. You can shop SKIMS Men's at skims.com/LockedOnNBA in SKIMS stores and let them know that we sent you. After you place your order, select podcast in the survey and select this show in the drop-down menu that follows. SKIMS is the official underwear partner of the NBA, WNBA, and USA Basketball. Okay. So when we came into this series, and I talked about this on Monday's show extensively and a bit with Rylan Stiles of Locked On Thunder on Tuesday's show, I was expecting that Minnesota would have issues. Like, this is not breaking news. Turnovers were going to be a big issue. And if you listen to, any of the commentary from any national shows or whatever, or read about Thunder turn teams over better than anybody else. Minnesota turns the ball over a fair amount. They've been really bad recently. That was always going to be a thing. The other thing that I talked about extensively on this show that I didn't hear a lot of anywhere else was that OKC allows a ton of corner threes. Remember, they were 28th in the NBA in terms of opponent three-point rate from the corners. 28th, meaning only two teams allowed corner threes at a higher rate than OKC. Minnesota was top 10. I think they were 5th or 6th in the NBA in corner three-point frequency, and their accuracy was like 10th or 11th as well. They're good from the corners, especially Mike Conley, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, to a lesser extent, Reid. There's somebody else that maybe it is Reid. That's the other one. There's 3 guys. Oh, DiVincenzo is also very good from the corners. And I'm going to pull the exact numbers for Thursday's show in terms of the corners specifically. Like, I'll chart, who shot the best from the corners, or nobody shot well for the corners. Like, where were the biggest problems here? But we could look at this just high level. Like, if you didn't watch the game, you just look at the box score and be like, wait a minute. You're telling me Reid, Dante DiVincenzo, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker combined to shoot 5 of 28 on threes? Yeah, that's right. 5 of 28 on three-point attempts for those guys, which is what? 20-ish%? A little less than 20%, my quick math, which is probably not right. But like hovering around 20%. That is really, really bad, and it's not going to happen again. We can go back and look at Game 5 against the Lakers. They shot 14% from 3. Game 1 against Golden State, which they also only scored 88 points in. They were miserable from 3. It was a real problem, and they turned it around quickly, albeit against a diminished Golden State team, but still a really good defensive team. Remember, Golden State's not OKC, obviously, defensively. It's a completely different animal. But Golden State was the league's best defense since March. And they lost Steph Curry, who wasn't exactly the heartbeat of their defense. Important, sure, but they still had Kevon Looney. I don't know why I started with Kevon Looney. Draymond Green, they still had obviously Jimmy Butler. Like, it was still a long athletic team that was really good defensively. And sure, we could include Kevon Looney in that, I guess. But several guys that are really good defensively, and Minnesota ended up being just fine after game 1. And a lot of it was progression to the mean. They're a better three-point shooting team than they showed in that one game in the Lakers series and that one game in the Warriors series. They're better than 29% from 3 on 51 attempts. They were 15 of 51. And the bench was 5 of 28, 5 of 29, if you want to throw in Jalen Clark. Like, that is not something that's going to happen again. And I know OKC was really good at opponent three-point shooting against. And certainly there's some skill to this. I talked about this on Monday's show. The way they close out to three-point shooters, they're very good at it. And I've said this about the Wolves over the past 2 years. It's not only luck. I think there's a really surface level, like you glance at opponent three-point percentage and go, oh, well, that's fluky. It can be. But there's also technique to how you close out and the strategy on which threes you're allowing. Now, I don't think it's a very sound strategy to allow a ton of corner threes. And in fact, that is how the Wolves were able to kind of build this lead in the second quarter that never reached double figures. But making corner threes is a big piece of it. And then they just started missing them. And a lot of them were not contested. We saw Mike Conley miss what? He ended up 1 of 5 on threes. Pretty confident that 3 of his 4 misses were wide open. Like, he just missed the open threes. Jaden had at least 1 missed wide open 3. Ant had at least 1 missed wide open 3. Nas had multiple missed wide open 3s. Dante, Nikhil, these guys all missed wide open 3-point shots. They all missed corner 3-point shots. That's not going to happen again. Yet, they will generate those open shots again because OKC is packing the paint. They're playing boxes and elbows. They're daring you to drive into the paint, and they want to strip the ball from you. They want to turn you over. They did some of that too, and that's going to happen. It just is. But can you limit it if you're Minnesota? Can you limit those silly turnovers? Can you take the dare from OKC and make the right pass to the corner? I mean, OKC is not rotating. They're not pre-rotating to the corners. They're not anticipating, or they're not trying. I mean, they're anticipating the Wolves are going to do that, but they're betting the Wolves will turn the ball over before they get to that pass, or they'll be able to close out well enough that the Wolves miss that shot, or it's a guy like Jaden McDaniels who they're fine with taking that shot. And I thought it was a great sign for Minnesota that right out the gate, Jaden McDaniels knocks down a 3 when the Thunder dare him to shoot it. Then they close out. He takes a hard dribble and hits a 16, 18-footer in the middle of the floor that he scores the first 5 points of the game. That was a great sign. Well, he only scored 1 bucket the rest of the way. He had 7 points before he fouled out in 24 minutes. And the Thunder will undoubtedly have a very similar game plan for game 2. But Jaden's he will play better than this because he ended up only getting the 5 shot attempts, 3 assists, 3 turnovers, fouled out in 24 minutes. I think he's going to play better moving forward, and the Wolves will shoot better from outside the arc. So the fact the Wolves were able to generate open threes was not a surprise. And they were always going to at least have one bad shooting night. Like, that was going to happen at some point. And it just so happened to happen in game 1. So the Wolves turned the ball over like we expected. OKC converted those turnovers into points like we expected. And yet Minnesota was still up by 4 at halftime, although it should have been double digits. The 3-point shooting, Minnesota got what they wanted outside the arc, as expected. But they didn't make enough of them. And then the other thing, I talked about the point of attack defense that led to the paint disparity, which I wasn't expecting at all. I mean, Minnesota, like, nearly 2/3 of their shot attempts were outside the arc. I mean, overall in this game, Minnesota had, 83 field goal attempts, and 51 of them were threes. Minnesota only tried 32 2-point shots in this game, which is nuts. And that was part of the issue in this one. What was the other thing that I had? We talked about turnovers. We talked about paint disparity. I guess those are the biggest things. Offensive rebounding there were a couple moments where it looked like it was going to be a significant thing. Minnesota had 12 offensive rebounds. OKC only had 9. The other thing I wanted to talk about related to the turnovers is we talked before the series about how good OKC is at turning defense into offense. And that's going to be a huge theme of this series, and they did exactly that. I mentioned earlier, Minnesota only had 4 more turnovers than OKC in this game. They only had 4 more turnovers. But guess what? OKC scored 31 points off of Minnesota turnovers. Minnesota only had 10 off of 15 OKC turnovers. That's crazy. I mean, that's nearly 2 points per possession for OKC off Minnesota turnovers, and it's what's 15 points on or 10 points on 15 shots is 0.6 points per possession for Minnesota, which is miserable. That disparity is probably going to be in OKC's favor throughout the series, but it can't be that stark. It can't be like a nearly 2 points per possession versus a 0.6 points per possession and turn it over 19 times against OKC. They just cannot do that. It should not be an option for Minnesota to do that. And again, as a reminder, OKC is 9th in running in transition in terms of frequency. They're 11th in scoring in transition. So their efficiency in transition is very good. That is something to be afraid of in the series, and OKC did it in this game in a big way. So I want to kind of summarize those points into like my immediate takeaways from this game, and I want to hit studs and duds, and that's how we'll close the show here today. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at CarGurus. Shopping for a car should be exciting, not exhausting, but between the confusing prices and hidden fees, it can feel overwhelming. And that's why I love using CarGurus. They help you cut through the noise and show you the best deals with full confidence. With over 4 million listings, CarGurus has more new and used cars than any other major online marketplace in the U.S. They verify dealers, provide real price analysis, and give you the tools and data you need to make the right choice without second-guessing yourself. If you need a deal you can trust, CarGurus makes it easy to compare vehicles side by side with unbiased deal ratings. The best feature is the price drop alert. So if you're looking for something in particular, you'll know exactly when the perfect car is available for your budget. Plus, the in-depth vehicle details give you peace of mind before you step onto any lot. It's no wonder that SimilarWeb estimated traffic data shows CarGurus is the #1 most visited car shopping site. Buy or sell your next car today with CarGurus at CarGurus.com. Go to CarGurus.com to make sure your big deal is the best deal. That's CarGurus, CarGurus.com, CarGurus.com. Okay, so putting a bow on game one before we hit studs and duds. Number one, they cannot turn the ball over 19 times. Realistically, are they going to turn it over 12, 14 times? Yeah, probably. But you can't do it 19 times. You can't give up 31 points off of turnovers, live ball turnovers, and, it's snowball. They can't do it. Number two, they're going to shoot the ball better. They're going to get open three-point shots, and they are going to make them. They're very unlikely to shoot sub 30% for the entire series. There's going to be a progression to the mean, and that's going to be a game they have to win. Similar to how Golden State had to win the big Jimmy Butler game in game 3, and they were up in the fourth quarter and could have gone up 2-1 on the Wolves. That didn't happen, and they were toast. Minnesota, if they shoot 49% from threes or something in game 2, they have to win, and they should, because at some point it is math, and they're going to shoot more threes than OKC, and they're ultimately going to make more. It's one of the reasons why I think the Wolves have a really legitimate chance to win this series, is they're going to shoot and make more threes. OKC didn't make a three until what? I don't think they made a three in the first quarter. Like OKC, I had like 2 made threes at halftime. And so along with that, the bench will be better for Minnesota. And then the other thing is, I don't think the paint disparity will be this big moving forward. I think Minnesota will do a better job at the point of attack. I think they will carry, like what they did in the first half of this game is very repeatable. And I know OKC wanted to talk about how it was all about themselves. And I think there was an SGA interview after the game where he talked about how they just missed layups. It wasn't exactly that. He got blocked at the rim by Jaden. He got blocked at the rim by Rudy. Minnesota is a good defensive team, and they made OKC uncomfortable for the first 24 minutes. The last 24 minutes did not go Minnesota's way. They failed at doing what we know they can do. OKC's execution wasn't dramatically different. Yeah, they made some adjustments. SGA started off the ball in most possessions of the second half. I mean, they had J-Dub bringing the ball up the floor. Like, that's smart. Dagno's obviously a very good coach. Goes without saying, they won 68 games. But Minnesota's defensive pressure was non-existent in the second half. And that makes Rudy's job. It makes, Nas was not good. We'll talk about that. But that makes any sort of, semblance of interior defense you're going to have. It makes it really hard when these dudes are coming downhill, turning corners easily on the perimeter defense. That was a problem in this game for Minnesota. All right, studs and duds. Julius Randle was the best player on the floor for Minnesota, and it was not particularly close. He had some bad turnovers, especially the second half. He was not good in the second half of this game, but I thought he was still the best all-around player for Minnesota if you take the body of work for the game. Julius had 28 points. 20 of them were in the first half. He shot 9 of 13. I think it was 9 of 11 in the first, or 8 of 11 in the first half, 8 of 10. 5 of 6 on threes, 5 of 6 at the free throw line, 8 boards, 1 assist, 1 steal, and 5 turnovers for Julius Randle. Great in the first half, not so much in the second half. Another stud in this game, man, it's actually pretty tough. Another stud in this game. Oh, man, it is not easy. I'm going to cheat a little bit and go half studs and half duds. Mike Conley, I thought was great defensively. I thought he was poor offensively. Donte DiVincenzo, same thing. Thought he was really good defensively, poor offensively. Nickeil, I thought was bad on both ends of the floor. Naz was bad on both ends of the floor, although he did get 8 rebounds and 4 assists. I don't think Naz Reid played well. I don't have any other studs. I really don't. I mean, it was really just Julius Randle. Like, I know I said that there are a lot of things that are correctable for Minnesota and all that, but like, and I mean that, but none of these dudes could shoot. I mean, Naz Reid was 1 of 11 from the field, 0 of 7 from 3, and some questionable decisions, to say the least. Some classic Naz turnovers in the first half of the second quarter, and he finished a second worst on the team, minus 21. And by the way, it was a minus 23. Donte, just too many 30-footers for Donte. 9 points on 14 shots for Donte DiVincenzo, trying to shoot his way out of this kind of playoff slump he's been in. Although he was better the second part of the Warriors series, but not good. Nickeil, I thought, was bad on both ends. I don't think he was great defensively. He was not good offensively. 2 of 9 on threes, 3 of 11 shooting. Like, just really bad. Conley, I mentioned, I thought competed defensively, offensively. You know, he was actually, Mike Conley was the only guy on the Wolves that was not a negative in this game, by the way. 23 minutes was a +5. Everybody else was a negative for Minnesota. And for as bad as I thought Rudy was offensively and kind of non-existent defensively, Minnesota was only a -2 and Rudy was on the floor, which was the second best mark of any Timberwolves player that played in this game. So like Rudy and Mike, I thought were both good defensively. It's just they weren't helpful offensively. Conley was 2 of 8, 1 of 5 on threes. It's not helpful. Ant's game overall, I thought he disappeared in the second half a bit. Didn't score in the fourth quarter, was limited in the third quarter. I know he rolled his ankle at the end of the first quarter, but I mean, like, we've seen Ant do that every, 5 games at this point. I don't think that hindered him. I think he got taken out a little bit he didn't get calls early in this game, and SGA did. And he's got to be tougher than that. He's got to understand, like, hey, look, I'm big and strong. I'm athletic. I play a certain way. I can avoid contact. I can go through contact. I can go through what the NBA calls marginal contact, going back to the SGA foul last year. That was insane. That was not a foul. And even on review or last 2-minute report, not a foul. Wolves fans know what I'm talking about. Like, yeah, it's not fair the way that it's officiated, but you got to be tougher than that. You got to fight through it. You got to understand this is the conference finals. And I can't throw a game away. I can't essentially throw a game away because I'm going to just be upset about it, and I'm going to let it impact everything else I do. That's clearly a coaching point for the Wolves coaching staff. And there were positives about Ant's game. He was aggressive on the boards. He led the team in rebounding. I thought he was really good on the glass in the first half of this game. I thought overall his decision-making was pretty good until late in the game when it looked like he had kind of already decided we're probably not winning this game. I hate to say that, but that's what it looked like. Now, we've seen this happen before, and Ant's going to bounce back and be fine, and the Wolves will bounce back and be fine. I think there's a pretty good chance they win game 2. It's one game. The Golden State game was pretty disappointing after Steph goes out and they still lose that game and score just 88 points. This is not too dissimilar. They scored 88 points. They shot 35% for the field, 29% on threes. They turned it over, 19 times. Actually lost the rebounding battle by 4 to OKC. Like, there's a lot to hate about this game, but also a lot to be like, hey, look, it's not going to play out this way again. It really shouldn't. I want to talk about, dig into that a bit further. I want to dig into the actual shot selection, what went well, what didn't for Minnesota. That'll be Thursday shows. We get you ready for Thursday night's game 2 in OKC. And then, of course, back to Minnesota for game 3 on Saturday. All games of this series at 7:30, by the way, which is great. So that'll be what we do here the next few days. Overall, disappointing loss. But there's still a lot to feel okay about here moving forward if you're Minnesota. All right. That's all we got for you today. Big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And a reminder that for your second listen, you can go check out the Locked On NBA Big Board show. NBA draft expert Rafael Barlow reacts to every workout, interview, and rumor that leads up to the NBA draft, which is just about a month away now. You can find Locked On NBA Big Board on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.